let's get it started then. Welcome to the talk. We'll be taking a look at the Gerrit review and what happens in terms of the life cycle, the transitions of the state of a Gerrit review, etc., etc. So, let's. Couple of words about me first. Name is Sopot Cela. I work for Red Hat in the Netherlands. I do some Eclipse work and also some Fedora work, which is also related to Eclipse, of course. Mostly packaging plugins, so you can easily install them on your Fedora, doing yum install this and yum install that. Also been involved for some years now in the Eclipse community, mostly in platform UI as a committer in the platform UI and also in the Eclipse E4 tooling project. Actually, the E4 was the first, and then I became a committer in platform UI. But also quite some contributions have gone into PDE, SWT, and other, let's say, related projects in Eclipse. Let's get it going with how Gerrit review is born usually. Like, it's basically sometimes a mix between frustration and the goodwill to fix a bug. Basically, once people calm down, they kind of then go and file a Bugzilla sometime and say, yeah, I'll file this new bug, I'll check the comments and see and make sure that we find a fix for it, and in the best case, they create a Gerrit change. I will not actually go into the technicalities of creating the Gerrit change, going to the IDE, setting up your workspace. I'm sure there will be quite a lot of talks for that, and you can do your buffs, you can do your hackathons to actually see and try it. I will mostly look at what happens after that, like what committers and usually long-time contributors build their own habits on how to treat a Gerrit review and what the +1 means and what the -1 means. But for new people that are new to Gerrit changes, it's kind of more difficult, and I'll try to help that group of people in sort of making it easier for them to handle a Gerrit review. Okay, so you see, yeah, the process is there. You encounter the bug, you file it, you fix it, and hopefully it will be merged into the repository. So let's start quickly with the anatomy. A typical Gerrit review. Not sure if this works. No. Okay. But you see the mouse? Oh. Okay. So yeah, it's basically that's a typical Gerrit review. In the top left, you have the message and like what the review is supposed to be doing, basically fixing a bug. And then you have the owner of the bug, which is the one who created, and on the lower part you have you have the files that were changed and the comments, much like in Bugzilla. Some of them are automated, like the Hudson CI is basically the continuous integration server that is actually listening for any change and trying to build and then giving you an opinion whether it builds, well, not actually an opinion, but a fact, whether it built or not. So some are actually from humans and some are from Hudson or from automated messages. So what can happen to a Gerrit review? This is basically, so in this case, on the top left, you see Olivier has proposed the change, and these things can happen to a Gerrit review. This is my view as a committer on the project. I can kind of make a code review to that. So we'll go in details on what those mean, but basically this is where the first changes to the life cycle of a Gerrit patch go. There is the verified part, which is usually Hudson doing the thing I showed you before. It tries to build, and if it works, he verifies it. If not, he says -1 on the verified, which is useful because if it doesn't build, then it doesn't even make sense to review it. Usually, if Hudson says -1, then no one will ever review your patch until it actually builds. So don't expect that. So let's go through the alternatives. The first one is the -2. -2 is kind of sad for the contributors usually, because that's usually what happens to your code if you get a -2. It can be, usually it's major design concerns, like everyone agrees that this bug is there and everyone agrees that we need to fix it, but the contributor might try to push the solution this way, and like the committer wants to push it that other way. Yeah, thanks. It's best moment for them to fix the dishes. Yeah, it can be a disagreement, as I said, also with the approach. There are cases in which a bug is in some kind of middle ground, and it can be this or that project that has to fix it. So if the committer says that no, this is not our job to fix it, then he'll just push a -2, and then yeah, all your effort is gone basically. And usually what people do is either they abandon the change, or you need very big changes to the code to kind of salvage it and make it useful. I dug out. Well, I have to say -2 is not that common in Eclipse, so I had some trouble finding one. But let's see through that. In platform, we had a discussion on whether we can completely remove it, because it sounds kind of overly unpolite. But then at some point we decided that it should just stay there. I mean, it's a way of the committer to push the disagreement on the next level and say, not just I disagree, but I strongly disagree, which is fine. It's not a big deal. So let's take a look at an example. I have also the local version. Yeah, it doesn't work like this. Let me open. Okay. So this is an interesting case of what can go wrong. Sorry, of course. Ooh, that's big. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. But I cannot see it right now. Okay. Okay, so Torkild here tried to make a change, quite a big change, on the Myelin docs project, and basically this was almost still too big. Okay, that should be fine. So it's like 1,300 lines of code, which is quite a big change. It's usually a bad sign, because the bigger the pet set, the less chances are that it can get a review soon, and even if it gets it soon, it's always more difficult for a committer to see the big patch, because there's lots of time that has to go into that. But anyway, so then David, which is a committer, long-time committer of Myelin, says, yeah, I'm sorry, do not submit that, because it's really like, I kind of like the idea, but he has quite some concerns with the design. And then he goes on explaining this and that in the comments, which is also this from the side of the committer takes a lot of time, so it's not something that you can just do and quite quickly and throw around your comments over there. So this also is a valuable effort from the committer to go through all this and kind of tell you what's supposedly wrong. And then Torkild also tried to salvage some stuff and say, well, but I have another opinion on this. And he went on doing, like explaining everything. And he made some changes also, and basically trying to salvage the thing. And then David said, it's still like my concerns are, my concerns are still there basically. He doesn't want to give up, but he makes a really nice explanation of why that is. So that's kind of very useful for the creator, like the owner of the review. And anyway, this goes on for some time, and you know that Torkild really gets creative now with this answer and really tries to salvage the work that he's done. But ultimately, there is basically yeah, ultimately David doesn't react anymore, and basically, if we go to the end, yeah, this is the last attempt from him to salvage everything, but in the end he basically says, I'm abandoning this and I'm going to fork the thing. So there was a lot of energy in this Gerrit review. It's also from the reviewer, but also from the creator of the review, which is, but if you think about it, if at least some of the design level choices that you make, it's usually possible to discuss them up front before making a 1300 patch set and having it reverted and abandoned. So it's nice. I mean, some details, like the coding details, it's not that easy to discuss up front, but the part that is the design level, whether you want to go this way or that way, it's usually best to discuss it up front in the bug and say, I plan to do this, and what do you think, rather than doing it and then having it basically having it destroyed. So this was the, no, it doesn't want to start. This was the -2. Okay. The -1 is quite more common. I've seen people that usually are quite discouraged when they get the -1, but it's quite common. I mean, I've been years and I get every second time I push a Gerrit, I get a -1. My boss gets a -1. Everyone gets a -1. So it's not a really big deal to have. It's quite common. Yeah, it means usually a minor disagreement with the approach, not something that is really bad, so it can be salvaged most of the time, and also can be used for lots of things, like you made a typo and you get a -1. That's not a big deal, but you still get a -1. So it's not like really that bad. Everyone gets it. And every time that I've seen, no exception, it has always been with comments, and the committers will tell you what to do and how to fix it. And it's usually not that much effort to fix anyway. The most dangerous thing that I have seen and also experienced myself, as we will see in the next example, is what I've decided to call the -1 spiral. And it goes like this. You fix something and you get a -1 on it, and the committer says, well, please fix this because it's not okay with your patch. And you fix it. And you push the fix, like the second one, and he said, yeah, but I didn't mean that, I meant it like this. And you say, okay, I'll change it again. And then you get a -1 on that also. And you get, yeah, while you're there, fix this and that. And then you, after some bad language probably, fix it again. This can be really discouraging. I mean, especially if someone is new, this can be really discouraging because there's lots of frustration going in there, and it says like, yeah, I'm never going to do this ever again because it's really, really frustrating. But the thing is that the communication, at least how I feel it, as I said with the -2, if you communicate more up front and say, I want to do this, and ask also for the suggestions to be quite explicit, not just some like in the air suggestions, that's usually quite a fix to this issue. And both, of course, from the reviewer and the reviewee side. Also, the reviewers have to be more explicit, but also the ones that create the review have to be quite pushy to the committer and tell him, yeah, you have to be more explicit, because otherwise it's going to go like this, not this, but that, not this, but that. And this can easily become a spiral of death, and then the Gerrit review is basically done. You won't touch it anymore, so you're done. This is a really nice example. That's relatively recently. Let me. Okay. Okay. So I tried to make a change some months ago, and I think this was my record-breaking change with almost 10 attempts at the same thing. 10 times trying to do it and getting -1s, but we eventually got it working. You see here, this was also a relatively big change. And yeah, Lars came there first and said, yeah, no, it's a good idea to make this change, but you basically need to change some things. And then he made some comments and also then suggested another alternative of fixing it. And already here, I was really like, why the hell didn't I discuss this before? I shouldn't have spent all my time, because it took 3-4 days to work on it, and then you basically have it thrown. Because the suggestions are valid. When he says that, and I also thought about that and said, yeah, that makes sense. So there's my 3 days of work. So right there I was thinking, yeah, I should have done this before. I shouldn't have put all this work and then try and push it, because it's not suggestions on the actual code, on the implementation details, but it's the approach that makes a difference, and that can be easily discussed up front. So, and this went on for really yeah, and then I made an attempt, and yeah, Brian also joined in with some comments, and then I said, yeah, I'll eventually fix this. Oh, why is it? You can see that. That's strange. Yeah, so anyway, that's my name. Yeah, so this went on for a long time. And then, yeah, Lars also decided that it's a -1 again for the second alternative that I posted. So he changed his mind again. And then I tried to, yeah, there we go. Then I tried to fight it out with some comments. But this is the point where I decided to kind of make it stop and tell him, can you be more explicit? Because it was not necessarily his fault. Maybe I wasn't also very understanding of what he meant. But this lack of explicit suggestions took us some way, that I was pushing patches and he said, no, I didn't mean this. And I was doing it again and he said, no, I meant that, and things like that. So this is where I stopped and said, just be quite explicit with me, and that saves you a lot of time. It didn't for me in that case that much, but usually every time that I've, after this patch, I basically changed my way of doing it. And initially you always ask for an opinion in the bug before starting the actual implementation work. And after this, yeah, Lars came back with a big explanation of what he meant, and that was quite useful for me to kind of make it work. And then Brian basically, I agreed with Lars on the change, and then Brian, which is another committer, said, yeah, you're both wrong, so it doesn't work. And, and he actually was right. Which was really, for me, was that's quite unlucky. But he actually was right, and his observation was something that we had both missed. Yeah, but sometimes the committers don't have time to look at it since the beginning, so as soon as they get a chance to jump in, then they basically push their opinion. And in this case, it was quite a valid opinion, but also quite unfortunate for me. So yeah, I sat down again. You see, Pat said 5, Pat said 6. That's me working. And then Lars says, yeah, this is good enough for me. But Brian says no. But at least he kind of sweetens the blow by saying, yeah, it's almost there. And Brian. And at some point, he says, yeah, just some other minor things. And then Lars decides to retract his +1. But eventually, by this stage, it was very, very minor things. And this was just to tell me, don't rush and push it, basically. So in the end, the funny thing is that at some point, Hudson started to jump in. This was patch 7 or 8. And up to now, the build worked, so the thing built. But as I was almost there, also Hudson said no. It was like he was the only one missing in the party. But yeah, of course it was my fault. The build failed. But this was like at this moment I just said, yeah, this is like really funny. I should do a talk for this. Yeah, and then this is where we basically got the blessing from Brian, and I actually merged it in. But also this one, like the lesson here was really important, because if this took me a lot of time to sort of make this change and push it into the code, but it would have taken me much less if I had been, let's say, more upfront or discussing things upfront before starting and throwing my energy into all of this, especially the initial part, because these small naggings will always be there. But especially the initial one would have saved a lot of effort. Let's say, if I had discussed at least the abstract level approach from the beginning. So that was a nice lesson to have. And also this, I want to stress again, the explicitness of the suggestions. Sometimes people, for whatever reason, they don't have time, this and that, they say, do it like this. And you never walk away without really understanding what he meant. Don't walk away from the discussion and think, I will figure it out while I'll be doing it, because most likely you'll have some of this. So just ask him to be more, or her, to be more explicit in whatever suggestion he has. So unless you fully understand it, don't just walk away from the conversation and say, yeah, I'll figure it out myself. Yeah. I have Johnny Depp here showing how I felt. I'll show you now. Yeah. So, yeah, this is basically it was quite a bit more animated than this, but this kind of gives you the idea. And hopefully you won't run into that. Then we get into the positive area, which is nice. A +1 is usually so when you are asked to review it, you can either, there are two things you can do as a committer. You can either look at the code, just eyeball it and say, yeah, I can't find anything wrong with it, and that's usually a +1. Or you can actually get the code, get the merging, test it extensively, and just say, yeah, I fully agree with this, I tested it myself, so that's a +2 and let's merge it. But for lots of reasons, people just want a second opinion and this and that, and this is when you get your +1. And sometimes you get into a situation that no other committer is reviewing it and it stays in a sort of limbo. In that case, there are a couple of things you can do. You can either ping on the bug and say, hey, there's this pending thing, so anyone available for review? Or as a last resort, if it's just one committer that you need, then you can also mail on the mailing list and say, there is this important patch that I have, so please, if anyone is available, take a look at it. I have a very quick one here also. For this one, that's kind of a very interesting case. Let me open that. For some reason, this thing comes big. Yeah, so this is me again, trying to push a change. It was a relatively trivial, not so trivial, but it needed some testing. And you see Alex here says just a +1, and he wants Aaron to take also a look at it. This is quite common. So people just, even though you can be a long-term committer on the project, you can never think of all the implications that a change might have. So this is a very simple and clear case where Alex did good, because when Aaron jumped in, he found a couple of issues. If you see here, yeah, some stupid mistakes that I had made, so he pointed them out to me. I tried to fix them, forgot one even, and he said, yeah, now it's working. So it was good that he basically said, yeah, I need a second pair of eyes to see it, because it's quite common, and it's also good practice in a sense, because it's always better to be safe than sorry, unless your change needs to go on really fast, and that's always dangerous. And sometimes people rush it, but then you have the danger of having it, let's say, reverted. So, yeah. And then, of course, after +1, you get what I like to call the Banderas moment. That's when you get the really nice +2 on your Gerrit review. That's basically it doesn't need much explanation. After all your things, and it's usually basically a movement of states. So you push it first, it goes from -1 to +1. So it's a long way. Don't get surprised that you won't get a +2 right away. It almost never happens. So in closing, there are some final other scenarios that you can find your Gerrit review in, and hints of what you can do about it. Yeah, there's the stalemate, which means basically that it's just staying there. The good thing to do initially is to take a hint of interest before you even start the work. So if you need to have a feeling that people are interested in fixing that bug, because if it's a bug that is targeted for the next release, like 2 years from now, there's a high chance that no one will take a look at it in the near future. So try to take a hint of interest from the committers. Say, yeah, if they say patches are welcome or we need to fix this soon, then you work on the bug. If you don't get, there's higher chance that your patch it will not be taken into account, because for every bug that we fix or that we treat, we leave 10. So for every one that you make happy, 10 you make unhappy, because that's how it works. There are too many bugs for us. So you can try and ping on the bug. That usually works, but even if that doesn't work, it doesn't mean that the patch is bad. So don't get much discouraged on the fact that no one's looking at it. It's just that it's not its turn. It doesn't mean that your patch is bad. Abandoning, yes. You saw Torkild abandoning it, and it's quite healthy. I've abandoned quite some patches. The approach is you basically say, even yourself, you don't like the approach anymore, you abandon it. So it's quite healthy, and feel free to abandon a patch that you really think it's not workable anymore. Just start over. It's usually faster. And yeah, as you saw, it can be a big deviation in opinion. Like the committer thinks this, the big gap, the gap is too big to fix, so people abandon it. And also reverting is quite common. So after everything goes well and you're +2, you have your Banderas moment, then someone basically sees a very unexpected and bad change and a bad effect of this and basically reverts it. And usually what is done, and what's also best to do, is just make a new one and let go of the old one, because there is no use to kind of revive that and do it from the beginning, because we usually just create from scratch. So, in kind of conclusion, if you ever have the chance to work with the Gerrit review, and keep in mind that you rarely get a +2 from the beginning, so don't get discouraged about that. It's not like, you rarely get that. No one gets it unless it's a very trivial, I don't know, spelling check error or something. And it's all this life cycle from creation to merging or whatever. It's just a sequence of states of this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, which is basically the plus minus ones. So it's a long road usually. It's not something that is done fairly fast. And the thing that I want to stretch is this clear communication part. It really goes a long way in saving your time and your reviewers' time. Before starting the Gerrit is very important, but also during the Gerrit. When you get hints, just make them tell you explicit hints as much as you can. Also before the design level, just decide that before with the committers, before actually writing code and spending your time. So, I think I'm on time. I think this was my slides. So, I'm open for questions now, if you have any.